Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything you would like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, what do you talk about in your rooms? Did you find something to discuss?
Well, I'll jump in because I have to jump off the call in just a second because I have a meeting on the hour. It's something I have to get ready for. But I'll represent breakout room 4. We discussed food as both a metaphor, but something to consider the people's reaction to and being sensitive to food disruption, war, food futures, changes in climate. Food can be both hopeful and catastrophic as we see our food systems changing and evolving in ways where the future does not look bright, and yet it's something we look forward to. There's eating as a celebration, but there's also hunger, and so sort of a complex, putting a few layers on kind of the nutritional value. But that was our group. Thank you very much, and nice seeing you all.
Thank you. That was good, really interesting. I think, Alexis, we had the same kind of discussion about kind of doom and people having anxiety and how to facilitate that kind of conversation. Anybody else?
I can go. So I don't know exactly what we did, but I'm calling it sticky futures and reference to something else that I was doing. But we were talking about that the choice of fruit can be used. Wait, what was it? It was, the fruit can be like a timer. So you could tell futures that, for instance, a grape is the time you take. Yes, that's it. The time you take to eat a fruit is also very important, I guess, because then if you eat a grape, that kind of future is very capsule, concise, and it just lasts how long you take to eat a grape. But imagine a future that is a grapefruit and that takes a really long time. And also it splashes everywhere, including your fingers, and then maybe from there it goes on your clothes, and so it has this like stickiness to them, like the future lasts longer because it kind of shows up in little dots on a wall, or maybe on your fingers for a whole day, maybe in your clothes. And you know, it's like a scale, kind of less sticky and more sticky futures.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
I like that. Sticky futures, that's perfect. Yes, and of course, this is that we're using more of our senses. And one of my questions I have had is on what have you forgotten, and is it a smell, is it a taste? So you know, so maybe that fits for your fits for your approach. Yeah, I like that. Ed also had mentioned that he had a wonderful mango. And you know, we're talking about ripe because the mangoes we have here in Finland, they're shipped here and they arrive and they're hard as rocks, you know, and when we wait for them to come ready, and then, you know, overnight and they're spoiled. So you have this time aspect with fruit. There are also seeds there. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe shortly from our room, we had some really interesting discussions about metaphors through fruits. So we were, for example, talking about this orange here and how this orange might help us to explain how we work or how we collaborate in different cultures. And if I look at this from a Nordic European view, then it would be, oh, we're all in the same boat and one goal. And because I'm in Mexico right now, I think I would interpret this very differently, or not very, but depending on the situation. So how the same fruit can be seen from very different perspectives, depending on where you are. or how you cut a fruit, for example, what tools do you have, right? What knowledge you have, how the banana should be peeled from which side.
Yep.
So if we kind of put that into trend analysis or weak signal analysis, how do we analyze these trends? With which tools do we do that, depending on the country where we are, or the background knowledge that we have, and what do we then come up with based on this technique that we used? Yeah, so there are many different metaphors and analogies through fruits.
I love that. That is the word that I forgot to mention that I'm kind of interested in that you mentioned was tacit knowledge. So how do we and often exploring that tacit knowledge is very hidden. You know, it's difficult to pry out, or well, maybe you just don't ask the right question. And I like the analogy that you have. Yeah.
I take off my president hat and just comment as another researcher. One of the things that's come to me about this during this whole demo hour is that these informal processes, like pet projects, informal approaches to futures, there's an explanatory aspect about why they would even work. Why are they even viable? And I think it's because people already have engagement with the future. Like it already exists. So it's like kind of throwing away the idea of like, if we could only get them to think of future more, then everything will be better, and kind of replace it with everybody is already engaging the future somehow. Let's find some useful ways to discuss that. Is maybe a better path forward, you know, or more beneficial path forward. So that was something that kind of came to my mind about this topic, and it's kind of interesting to think about explanatory factors, like why does your fruit method even function at all? Like why? I mean, aside from the aesthetics and art-based explanation, it kind of points to the notion that there is pre-existing anticipation happening in the world. So, yep. Just a thought.
Yeah, anybody else? The one thing that we were talking with Ed was that, for example, that there's this divide between is foresight and futures a science or an art? And so then we are kind of, so if we have to be a science, then we have to have very officious formal methods, you know, and then we have these kind of official methods, and they are tried and true, and they are tested, and they have the stamp, and they get the funding, or they get the acknowledgement. But then you've got this kind of crazy fruit method, and I pitched that maybe it's not having it might not hit the same mark, you know. It's like I don't know what it is yet, and until we get the right situation. But I know it has value, and so this kind of a artistic, creative experience. Can we kind of bring up the value of that as well? But it's kind of a fine line, you know, being acknowledged in our field. So maybe people have, I've heard of scenarios, I've heard of Delphi maybe, but the other things I'm not quite sure about, you know. And is that what you do? Yeah. The future stuff.
Amos, and maybe to connecting to, I feel like there's also a question within your comment that you just made. Because we talked obviously before this session, and you had these questions of, where could this method go next? How could we combine it with potentially other methods that are already there, or in which context could this be utilized? So all these questions you posed, and I think having now a group here of Foresight practitioners is interesting to maybe discuss these questions after we experienced it a bit. Also, we still have a few minutes, so maybe this is a discussion that we could move into, if anybody has some thoughts on it, some reflections, combining it to your own context, And yeah.
And
maybe I would pose a question, if that's okay, just for everyone, because I have to kind of out myself for not being a futurist practitioner. But I'm a designer, actually a UX designer. But I had some some connections with futures through my master's degree, because we had methods around design futuring. I don't know if that's a term which you're familiar with. Yes. And I think that's maybe kind of the same direction which the discussion is going right now. How can we implement more creative and maybe qualitative methods to get futures or futures discussions to become more tangible, maybe. And I think that's where the collaboration between futures and design is very fruitful. And now that this topic has come up, I'm really interested in your opinions, how this collaboration is, or if you think that those kind of more qualitative approaches are needed, or if there's room for that in your everyday practice.
I think that this could be mixed with. Go ahead, but you can please go ahead. Yeah.
I'll make it a very quick point. Thank you. If I could just add to that, and also to go back to a point that you made, Amos, about how some people may trivialize the use of fruit within a more formal methodology and within Foresight and Futures. But just relating to the point and the comment that you just made, Leonard, something quite powerful that the use of fruit does, which is definitely needed, I mean, within Foresight, within Futures, but at the intersection with design as well, is reconfiguring and kind of re-emphasizing or recentering the transformation of or recentering the creation of transformative visions of the future from some structure out there, which is in a formal setting at some university or in a company or a consultancy or within government, and taking it and taking it there and centering it within everyday life, and enabling people to kind of understand that the methods or the tools with which they can begin that process of imagination and reimagination doesn't have to begin out there. It can begin right here in the kind of situatedness of everyday life, using everyday items with things that you would encounter and use and feel and interact with on a daily basis. So I think that's quite a powerful function of using fruit. You know, you can just pick up really anything that's on your table in your kitchen or in your living room and use it for that purpose. And also just linking it to the design imperative. I suppose that's something which has kind of been forgotten or kind of lost as everything's become more bigger and more sophisticated and more connected and complex. The everyday has been lost within that discussion and within that process of imagination. So yeah, I don't know if that was I think it's just a comment back to your comment, Leonard, but also a comment on your fruit comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Really good points. And I think we could use more of the things that we have at hand, and that it is a kind of a design problem, and it's a framing problem maybe. So there's a project I'm a part of, and they're making, basically it's like kind of a climate theater for decision makers, where decision makers will come and from the city, and they will speculate on what they could do in different kind of crisis situations. But they don't call it like a futures crisis theater. They call it a policy operations room, and so you are invited now to a policy operations room, and you will make decisions on and basically they're shown a kind of a speculative film, and then they engage it, and they look at the decisions that they have made recently and in their local government, and how would that play out in this situation where there's flooding or disaster. But so it's kind of this framing. so maybe I could do this same fruit workshop with the military personnel, but I would have ration packs or something like that, or a survival pack. Build your own survival pack for the future that you're most scared about. This kind of thing, and they would engage in it. That's kind of like they would get to the. So this is I didn't say this, anything is written in my blurb there, but what we wanted to have a basic minimum product of is making meaningful conversations about futures. That's what we are supposed to do. So if that's not working, if the post-its are in the way of having a meaningful conversation, then we have to ditch those, or we have to kind of subvert them. So it is a design problem, and I think that we can learn a lot from designers, creatives, whoever can communicate or play with the communication. Yeah.
Just to very quickly add to that point, I can imagine one of the kind of main challenges behind that, at least for us as Foresight people and for you and others learning in design, is kind of going through the process of de-weirding something that's novel or unfamiliar to people who perhaps haven't interacted with it before. And that example of a military, in a kind of military, more formalized context, like demonstrates that very, very well. But yeah, as you mentioned, language, framing, story, artifacts, very powerful ways to do that.
Right, and I really like the fact that it was that you're using fruit, Amos, and I know that it's for that kind of personal and slightly ridiculous. You can't take yourself too seriously when you're holding a banana or or I don't know, an apple or half an orange. And I was thinking that it's just in those scientific or more cerebral types of spaces where we've come very compartmentalized ways of approaching things that these methods might be useful because it enables participants to be bodies and to be ridiculous and to be more than just heads. And enables different types of conversations between people rather than maybe just institutional roles. Once you soften those boundaries, maybe different types of conversations can happen as well that are more transformational rather than strategic. What do we need to change about ourselves rather than how we can change things without changing ourselves?
Very good points.
We also have a comment from Alexis, I think. Yeah, you're still here. I think very beautiful to start using different methods besides words, right? Finding new communication ways, and food could be one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, it was also the point to engage shy people. Also with children and students, I have been teaching, and the sure way to get to people to open up is to talk about, well, what food do you like? What food do you hate? What food will you definitely not want to eat tomorrow if we play? So food has a kind of an instinct that people have an opinion about it, and at least then it's a way to kind of open up.
I had the
I have a question for the group.
You go.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted someone, I think.
Go, Jess.
I have a question for the group. So which fruit do you think is like a villain? Kind of a villainy fruit. What does the group say?
The fruit that
You're thinking
surprises
too
you.
much. Set it out.
Dragon fruit. Raisins are definitely villains.
Oh, that's cool. That's an intimidating one.
Yeah.
Wait, tomatoes? Wait, explain. Explain how it.
Because tomatoes are always misidentified as vegetables, so they're like a villain. They always surprising everybody that they're fruits, and they're
like the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Also, I was just reading something recently that composting
Mhm.
tomatoes is risky because they can spread diseases faster. So they, but I don't know if this was a credible source or not, so I shouldn't be spreading it. But
Mhm.
maybe they're.
They grow, but yeah, they also
Wow. Wait,
they
Alexis said
they
raisins.
squirt. You
I
know,
want to
you
know.
bite
I
into a
forgot
tomato.
about it
Yeah, plums. Yeah.
You ever bite into a plum
Plums and
that you
raisins.
thought was
Yeah.
stoned?
Yeah.
It still has the stone.
Yeah.
I have chipped teeth to prove
Wow.
that plums are evil.
Long-lasting evilness.
Yes, the
Totally.
evil is hidden inside.
Mhm. That's true.
I said raisins.
Cashews are fruit? Sorry, Alexis.
Oh,
Raisins.
I said raisins because I don't like them, and they're always they look like chocolate chips in a cookie, and then I get a mouthful of raisins.
Yes, it's the sneaky fruit.
Yeah.
The sneaky chocolate chip, basically.
During the pandemic, I was also collecting all the seeds from the different fruit that I had. I somehow like realized that you can grow from tomatoes and grow, and then I started growing everything, avocado, anything on my balcony, just to see what. Apple tree did really well, even survived the winter here in Finland, but realized that it's going to get really, really too big, so.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Any other observations? But I'm happy that you see the potential. But also, it can be any inanimate objects that you have at hand, in the right context, and especially in a time of kind of high tech foresight. Let's not forget these really very simple things. We get the right people together and share something, and you can use what you have at hand. I'm curious also about this kind of some of these kind of a GPS kind of tracking technology that I could do some work where, for example, you would have a stand of food in a busy city, and people could pick the food that they want depending on what party they wanted to vote for, or what issue they wanted to, these kind of things. I think there's like potential for a little bit technology to kind of be involved there somehow.
Maybe we for sure, Amos, should share your contact details. If anybody wants to bear with you afterwards. But I think the way that you just summarized and brought attention to the physical world again in these times of technological advancements was a really nice summary of our experiences with fruit today while being on a Zoom meeting together. And I think if there are no further questions, comments, feel free to still put comments in the chat, but I think we can slowly close. Feeling the vibe? Yes. And so we have your Amos, your contact details in the chat now, LinkedIn, you're also there to find. And then I think I just want to say a big thank you to you for sharing your approach, this very creative approach, bringing a bit more colorfulness into the Foresight word, letting us play with it. It was great to collaborate with the JFS network today for the first time, doing this in a collaboration with another community. Yes, and we also have your contacts in the chat, and then you find a Google Doc link. So as I said at the beginning, these demo hours are happening monthly. So if you want to share your unique approach, something that you would like to get feedback on or just spread the word about, then feel free to sign up in this document, and we have some slots still available this year. But yeah, with that, I think We will
Thank
close.
you very much for everybody attending. That was very nice.
Thank you. We will stop the recording and make it available for everyone afterwards.
Thank you, everybody.